How is it that some parents visit school for parent-teacher meetings and they look exactly like their kids? Photocopies. Why do they laugh, have mannerisms, and oft-times behave alike? I have this idea that has been mulling over and over in my mind since my very first day of teaching 36 Form 1 students, otherwise known as 6th graders in the Northern Hemisphere, at Fairfield Intermediate in Hamilton, New Zealand. It was the beginning of the school year, February 1976, and just before my 21st birthday. What if all the arguments from our university education class about nurture versus nature could be substantiated in my own classes? Were we born this way due to a nice mix of our parents' DNA? Or did we become like this because of the environment and communities we grew up in? So began my journey of wonderment. I was raised in New Zealand by John and Gwyneth Cook, the oldest 3 children. When I was 12 years old, I was on school patrol duty at the busy road crossing 50 metres from the intermediate school gate. One afternoon, a parent passed by me and stopped her car. She had not seen my mother since they themselves were 12 years old, but announced to me that I had to be the daughter of Gwyneth Houghton. Indeed I was, and I laughed. "You even laugh the same way as her," she said. That was it. I changed my hairstyle, I switched laughs, I did everything I could to not look nor sound like my mother. I was 12, remember. It did not work. Facial features could not easily be changed, and I was stuck for life with the fact that I was my mother's daughter. Hereditary. The genetic traits that we are given because of who our parents are and who their parents were, a continuum of sorts. But there was more to the externals obviously seen by others. There were my attitudes, my morals, my beliefs, and my values. They were all my parents' doing, and it was time to separate them out and to own them for myself. My parents raised us in church with Sunday school prayer meetings and Easter camps. Here is where the community of believers, my environment, gave serious input to where my values and beliefs were. The strong adults in my life began to add fuel to refine my thoughts and ideas that were being tested. What did I believe for myself? And could I articulate them? Were my values simply those my parents espoused? Or were there some that I could remove and others that could be added? I began formulating an even longer list of values, but kept returning to the dominating ones of my childhood. Honesty, truth, faith, responsibility, cooperation, determination, and they were sticking longer than my arguments against them. When I entered university and teachers' college, one bright young lecturer informed us that we had to teach without showing any sign of the values that we grew up with and may have still believed in. This was the early 70s, yes, of the last century. I was shocked as my parents and community had deeply ingrained Christian values into my life. So I argued back that this would be impossible to do as our values are innately entrenched in who we are, and teaching without referring to them would be a neutral approach. Nevertheless, this was to become the pervading ethos of the times. The ramification of my family upbringing was very clear. We were taught by words and examples. Mum and Dad lived the way they wanted us to emulate as we grew up. The way of life was exemplified to us in parallel by teachers and pastors. Hereditary and environment working hand in hand. I began teaching 11 to 12-year-olds as I saw that for them, this was the year that they began to figure out who they are, to challenge and to reason more deeply. I began to form my own opinion about teaching and how I wanted to live by example. And no, it was not possible to separate my values from my teaching, much though I tried. So began my life of teaching around the world, journeying first to the furthest English-speaking country I could find, that is, the United Kingdom, where the more traditional households upheld the frightfully English traditions of respecting the elderly, i.e., parents and above, and the class system was still very much alive. Societal norms were upheld, although beginning to wear a little thin around the edges. Parents were still expected to teach family values that the laws held up for all to see. The parents' giftings to their children were apparent in the classroom: honour, respect, truth, and the norms of being British and all that entailed. Moving to India for 13 years showed up even more family giftings, as culture and religion are soundly woven into the family structures. Being ranked as the number one, the eldest son in a family carries responsibilities to the afterlife for the father, with burial rituals to be performed. Students were expected to work hard to maintain their esteem in society and to support their aging family members in retirement. Shifting now with a husband and 2 young daughters from South Asia to West Asia, and 9 years in Lebanon raised even more observations of the deep ingraining of society and familial values into children. Honour and or shame came from one religion, while another encouraged personal trust and faith. Values would clash as religious differences surfaced in discussions. The church you were married in would investigate the reasons for any divorce, and only the church could approve it. Your religion here, as in India, determined the law courts that you were judged in. The Lebanese Arab gifts of caring, sharing, and loving became our elementary school motto. These gifts from generation to generation were so obvious in the schools. One day, our daughters in high school advisory groups came up with the same 3 values: trust, truth, and love. We were surprised that they both agreed on these values, despite being in separate classes, and my husband and I could not remember the time when we had taught or modelled these values. Parents just do it, and the children observe, imitate, and model. They receive these gifts by default in so many ways. At birth, did your parents write a list of all the values that they wanted to teach you? Probably not. I heard this saying: you cannot tell if you have done a good job raising your children until they are 27, and by that stage it is too late. What scares me more is now when I see my daughters raising their own children, and I hear my own voice through theirs, in much the same way that my mother heard her voice in mine. Mirror, mirror on the wall, I am my mother after all. We take on the qualities and characteristics of our parents as a gift that keeps on giving. In 2003, we returned to New Zealand for 3 years for our 2 daughters to leave home and attend university, where their values and belief systems would be challenged, much like how mine were challenged at my own alma mater. The gifts given to us as parents by our parents and passed on through our family were invaluable in our daughters becoming adults. Facing pending reality, we let our daughters fly from the nest, and we left the country again for Southeast Asia and Hong Kong in 2006. Coming to Hong Kong was an eye-opener as we observed the closeness of many parents with their children. During parent-teacher conferences, the questions for teachers included: does my son tell the truth? Did she respect you? Are they working hard? They were hopeful that their children would become upright citizens of society and uphold the Christian truth and values that they themselves had learned. Parents consistently send their children to International Christian School, which I currently teach at, because of this. For the past 14 years, my 11 to 12-year-old students have written poetry based on the biblical worldview. One topic question is, what values are important? Often they cannot answer it personally until we talk about their family values, and then the animation begins. Honesty, truth, family, faith surface high on their lists. With these community and family values and attitudes also passed on from generation to generation in Hong Kong society, I decided to dig deeper. What are the characteristics of our parents that we see in ourselves and that maybe we are modelling and teaching to our own children? We asked all of grade 6 and ICS teachers 2 questions. What characteristic do you most value in your mother? What about your father? The paragraphs and value statements should not have surprised me. Humble and caring, kind, patient and calm, hard-working, loving, strong faith in God, perseverance, positive, humorous, good at whatever they do. And here's a statement from one student. I admire the persistent characteristic from my father because whatever I do, I really have to strive for excellence, no matter what. I have to turn failures into successes and not be upset by them, but learn from them. The students saw that they were persistent themselves because of their father or parents and their strong examples. One student quoted their family motto as, work hard, whatever you do, as unto the Lord. An ex-teacher from ICS wrote this, when I did my master's program and during the course of student interviews, I wound up getting tons of data on the role that parents play in raising motivated students. The data was clear. Kids who were motivated in high school overwhelmingly were those with parents who were actively involved in their kids' lives, passing on the gifts of time and knowledge. So what did Henry VIII say to his fourth wife? I won't keep you long. It has become clearer to me. We are deeply affected by nature and nurture, by the environment around us and the people who birthed and raised us. Regardless of the cultures I have visited and lived in, family values, personality traits, and faith are passed on from generation to generation. The parental gifts are ours, gift-wrapped in love, interwoven into our lives. We make the choice to keep or reject parts, but in the end, those student photocopies of their parents who entered the hallowed halls of our schools and classrooms are there learning the value and efficacy of being human. Thank you.